There he is. Nathan Harmon, how are
Hey,
you? Now, where are you right now?
I'm in basically Seattle, Washington. It's I'll butcher it, so I'm not even gonna try. It's a Chehalis, Washington. I'm here doing high school and a middle school tomorrow, and a family, community, public, anybody can come evening gathering. So good seeing you, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to see you as well. For those of you that love researching people as they speak, and you know who you are, let me show you Nathan's website here. So this is his website. It's Your Life Speaks, and you can go to his website, check out everything he's done. He's number one booked school speaker nationwide, 2017 to the current, speaking in over 1,100
Yeah.
schools. Nathan, that is a lot of schools.
Well, that website gets me in trouble with believers though, because when we have our hands in so many different irons and fires, and when we
Right.
do the public schools, uh, it's a lot more mental health and substance abuse, and because of church and state, when we began that years ago, so this thing with Your Life Speaks blew up, and so I've been a full Bible believer since 2009, when, God kind of intersected my life. But so when we started Your Life Speaks, I had no idea it was going to go from Indiana to national to international, and this thing, God has put his breath behind it. But now, so even when we were together at the 12 to 1, people start Googling and they're like, is this guy even a real believer? Because if you Google Nathan Harmon, you get tons of millions of views of like more of the motivational Tony Robbins, not the Torah teacher, but the big guy. And so it's hard for people to get a read. So it's been a Your Life Speaks has sometimes been a challenge in the faith community, because they're like, who is this guy? Is he really a believer, or is he just like a motivational? I'm like, dude, I step on everyone's neck trying to get them to pray and to die their flesh. And no, man, I'm all in, full Bible. But how are you,
Yeah,
man?
you sound like that you have the same problem as Dr. Jackson, right? Because he has a secular company that helps, three, 400 kids a week through private coaching, and he can't talk about God. Like he just can't do it. Like there is a separation there. I mean, he tries to sneak in as much as possible, and it began to itch at him so bad that the father had him start a whole nother company called Light Among Peers, where he does the same thing, except now he's completely unleashed. And so he's just letting people know this is what I do. And if you are a believer and you've got troubled
Yeah.
kids, we're bringing God into it. And so it sounds like, unfortunately, because you're dealing with public schools and public money, but I happen to know that you've got a few stories of God moments that happen in the middle of these pep rallies. So I think let's just
Yeah.
start off there. Like, talk to us about some of your most memorable moments. First of all, tell us what it looks like. Like, you go into a school, and is it like the pep rally type of atmosphere that
Yeah.
you're in?
I mean, it started with me just with my wreck and my accident. When I got released in 2013, 20, no, 2012, I knew I could get into schools talking about drinking and driving around prom time.
So first of all,
And
before
really,
you go there, a lot of our audience has no idea what you're talking about. So give us a 2 minute, because there's nobody in this audience that first of all has ever got a DWI. It's never had any drinking problem.
yeah,
But
yeah,
back up and let's talk about really your testimony.
yeah, yeah. So quickly, I was raised in the church. My parents got divorced when I was 12. I blamed it on Jesus. Became pretty much a hater of God. Ran to the world. Uh, Went to every counterfeit, substance abuse, drugs, pills. Developed eating disorder, suicidal. Just really a broken young man. And ultimately, in 2009, I was involved in a terrible accident at 23 years old, and my passenger had passed away. She came to be my designated driver. When we left that night, I got the keys to her vehicle, and we just didn't make it. Her name was Priscilla Owens. Um, Radically, though, God stepped in into the middle of my mess, Her family didn't know me and they forgave me instantly. And I always say grace became more than a word, it became an experience. Uh, and so I knew God had intersected my story, but choices have consequences. And so even though the family forgave me, Indiana didn't. And so in 2009, I was sentenced to 15 years in prison for reckless homicide. It was in there, though, God really intersected my life. Um, I began searching. I couldn't run to YouTube. I couldn't run to pastors. I could run to my Bible. And I had this massive man uh, named Stephen Ice. He was a messianic guy. I was raised as an Adventist, so I kind of had some Sabbath background and some biblical eating clean. And he just said, Nathan, you're a word guy. Words mean things. And so, who did Jesus come to save? And it led me into searching the scriptures and then coming into Matthew to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And that led to another thing. And so in 2010, the full Bible, I just became really a full Bible believer, realizing the rhythms and the cycles of the feasts and the festivals, and just began to seeking God, all in, all in. And there's a lot of cool God story moments in that story, but I ended up getting released 11 and a half years early. God opened up doors. I started leaving the prison, going all across the state of Indiana in street clothes, going into Division I colleges, into schools, into church functions. And the story of Priscilla's family forgiving me has really opened a lot of really unique opportunities for and been graced by God's willingness to allow me to share it. Even though I'm a Torah believing, feast keeping, Yeshua. I mean, I'm all in. That story's allowed me a lot of opportunities. So, but when I came home um, early, I reached out to one public school because I knew I wanted to make a difference in the public schools. And I knew I could talk about don't drink and drive around prom because we would always have speakers coming in then. And I was just pretty effective at it. And then I started realizing that I could talk about my struggles with suicide and my struggles with self-harming and my struggles with anxiety and my struggles with, just so many, and storytelling and asking the students questions and getting hands raised and seeing shifts. And, that just ended up going from Indiana to national to now we do a couple hundred schools a year. It took on a life of its own. COVID slowed it down and was able to help me reallocate and reassess because I like Dr. Jackson. I'm at a place where it's just about the gospel, man. I just tent meetings, full outreach, full Bible believing. Let's preach the gospel of the kingdom, not just the gospel of Jesus saves, but the gospel that was preached to them in Hebrews. This wasn't mixed with us with faith, like we live with faith. But in that, um, God has had some really cool stories. So it's like a school assembly, we've built quite a bit of trust in the public school spectrum. And so we're pretty well sought out. And then I will come, like tomorrow, I'm out here in Chehalis, Washington. I'll be there all day. I'll do 4 talks throughout the day, a couple big assemblies. They bring the kids in. I kind of go through topics and stuff. I'm real. It's just real life. Real knows real. Authenticity always bursts authenticity, right? And so, I talk about suicide and we talk about self-harm and we talk about anger and the root um, of a lot of these things that come. I think like suicide and self-harm, uh, eating disorders and anger, substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, all of these things, truthfully, are the symptom. They're the cough of the deeper rooted issue. Um, and when we don't face ourselves and we're not willing to really be vulnerable, those things come out in a plethora of ways. And so we do a school assemblies that way, and then we'll do breakout sessions with the high risk students, and really just you just love on them. You let them know that you see them. So that's kind of what that's looked like, and it's been a journey doing it. We had a few stories where the Holy Spirit has given us words. I remember we were in an Indiana school. And then when kids sometimes act up at the beginning, because we can have a crowd of 5,000 students in there, and it's almost a fun competition to me because it's like, can I wrangle them with my words and my actions and the momentum of the speech? to lock them in, right? It almost turns into like a chess match. But I know if there's an outspoken kid or a troublemaker, I'm going to run right into the crowd. We're going to talk face to face. I've learned if you punch them in the mouth with their words at the beginning, the hardest one, the knucklehead, it kind of settles the crowd down. So
Yeah, I bet.
there was a kid acting up, and the Holy Spirit just gave me words. I said, I know you're about to go to Purdue probably and be an engineer and da 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 da. And this kid is just like frozen. And like I read his mail, and he was like, "How did you know that?" And we just had to keep moving because I couldn't be like, "Well, actually, the Spirit of God absolutely is all over your life." But it's so there's been so many stories. We've had kids. We've gotten probably 2,000 emails from parents and students saying that our school assembly was the reason they didn't commit suicide and they went and got help. Now, ultimately, it's the Lord's doing, but He uses broken vessels like you and me and all of us. So, yeah, it's been an interesting space, Jim. Really digging in with students, but then also having a passion, more even now in the season of our life, to doing these giant tent revivals and preaching the gospel. So,
So let's talk about that for a second. So you're running all over the country and you're speaking at schools and you're making a difference in these school assemblies, and these kids are responding. I remember one story that you told me where you had asked if anybody in the crowd had struggled with suicide.
yeah.
And when you told me the response, I was shocked. Can you help tell that story for our audience?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and I think it's suicide and mental health is an important space in the faith community. I think, especially in the Torah community, because we know the importance of obeying commandments and instructions, there sometimes can be a big shame piece when, we fall and we make a mistake, or we're having thoughts that we don't think that we should. Um, and so, suicide is so prevalent. As in a real tangible option to people these days. It's a work of the enemy.
yeah.
Um, it's a hopelessness. It's a lie. But every school that I go to, I always ask this question, and people can actually Google on YouTube and could type in like suicide Nathan Harmon. There's this video would show up, and I ask, how many of you in here do you know someone, not you, but someone um, that's struggling with suicide, has talked about it, entertained the idea of it. And you'll see 6 out of every 10 hands, 7 out of every 10 hands just get raised. And it's really prevalent in all groups. We were just um, I was just at a Christian youth camp up in Spring Hill in Michigan, a big Christian camp, and there was tons of kids coming forward that were battling with suicide, and um, it's a real it's a real reality for some people that think it's an option, it's a way out. My words to them right now are, you're not weird or strange for having those thoughts. Uh, most human beings at one point in time has had a fleeting thought. Man, I just don't want to be here. Life sucks. I just want to give up. I mean, most of us have at one point in time have probably had a suicidal um, flutter, right? And so I just try to tell kids and even adults, it doesn't make you strange that you're having those thoughts. But Romans 12 says, be a living sacrifice. And so it's okay that you don't feel satisfied with this world and you don't feel like you have any hope or direction. That's okay, man, because a lot of us feel that way, but we've just learned to channel that to become a living sacrifice with purpose, to enter into the story of God, to the kingdom of God, to the plan of God, and take your eyes off what we feed grows and what we starve dies. So yeah, it's a heavy space. Um, but it's one that's needed, and I'm in a personal, you know figuring out how many next in these next coming school years, because ultimately uh, I know that this absolutely is sharing the gospel is the call. I burn Jesus, man. I burn Yeshua. Like I just I I know there was a season, and you've been now reaching out and trying to do tent meetings and preaching the gospel of the kingdom. And I think that's kind of a new thing to the Torah community to realize that, you can actually, the Hebrew says the gospel was preached to them as well to us. They just didn't mix it in faith in the wilderness. So there's a gospel um, that can be preached for full Bible things, Bible ways, as we like to say. So yeah,
So now tell me, like, okay, you're doing all these schools, and all of a sudden the Father has you starting these. When you say tent revivals, I think people might be thinking that you're talking metaphorically, right? I mean, tent revival like that. That's Billy Graham style, right? Like,
yeah,
but no, like
yeah,
Nathan really is talking about real tents
yeah,
and revival. Talk to us about what on earth, what kind of
yeah.
coffee did you have that morning when you got the idea to wake up and let's steal a firework tent and do a revival underneath it? Where did
Yeah,
this come
no,
from?
no. And if the other webs, Nathan Harmon, you would see at org.org. So there's two things. There's the Your Life Speaks, which is the school that's kind of separated, but all the faith stuff, Wilderness Driven Family or NathanHarmon.org. Uh, I knew in prison that God had really put a passion to do tent meetings, like legitimate, back what you saw in the day in the 50s, 60s tent revival. So, but I came into the Torah, and I really came into, and 13 years ago, the rhythms of the front of the book and all of these things. And yeah, that's it. You can zoom down, you'll see the tent actually, just a little farther down, you'll see that tent. There it is. But we when I came home in 2013 and we started a home fellowship and began, just navigating what it is to keep the feasts and the festivals and to realize that the full Bible's for us. And that grew. I began to realize, like, how can I continue to do like how do you do outreach as now a full Bible believer? Because all I saw were mostly Torah teachers and home fellowships, and everybody was coming out of the church, and I was like, how does this work? So I was wrestling, and then I don't know, probably 7 years, 6 years ago, we our family and our ministry, we went and bought a tent. We spent like every dollar we had, and we bought a 110 by 60 foot tent that has two 30-foot center poles. I've had 1,000 people under it, rough, comfortably 700 fit under it. And so we did one in about 6 years ago in Kokomo, Indiana. And it was such a big tent, I didn't understand the undertaking of it. And I ended up, after we did it, we put the tent up, the schools took off. I was able to do a lot of Christian festivals because of the story. COVID happens. It's in the storage unit. We go out, my wife and I go out to the desert, and we knew we were supposed to get away in 2020 at the beginning. Nobody knew how serious anything was. So we went to the desert, stayed in a tent, a little normal tent, for 40 nights. Not in purpose, but it was 40 nights and 40 days, about 53 days total. And then we knew we were released to kind of come back to Indiana. Well, we started doing a Bible study with the group. They started really asking questions about feasts and festivals. We were getting close to the Feast of Trumpets of 2020. And they were like, man, I've always had a vision of like a tent meeting. And I was like, I have a tent. And so we put this tent up and hundreds came. And from that tent meeting, somebody donated the trailer. And then the next tent meeting, somebody donated all the sound equipment. And we are legitimately doing tent revivals, but it's not just the gospel of Jesus saves. It literally is, to me, it's the gospel of the kingdom. It's
Yeah.
it's the full gospel. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He's into the doorway, but now you're in the household of God. We really look at the verse, and I make people really look at this verse when it says that, the enemy wants to sit on top of the mountain of congregation in Ezekiel, and that word congregation is Moed, it's feast days. And so we just really preach the gospel and what it is to be a part of the commonwealth of Israel, and make people have to wrestle with, not only is Jesus saving you, but there's so much more satisfaction Jesus didn't overpromise himself when he told the woman at the well, drink of me and you'll be satisfied. So why are so many of us not satisfied? Maybe we've never taken that full drink
Yeah.
and drank of that actual cup. And so we've been now doing these tent meetings, and I'm a Torah touting, Yeshua believing, I mean, full Bible, and but we're able to do it in a way that we can really bridge the gap and we can really cross and it's not just the fact that you got to get this head knowledge. It's not that, hey, by the way, this isn't biblically truth. This is out of context. But it's with spirit and truth and spirit, as
Yeah.
in, if you don't have the fruit of the spirit, if you don't understand the attributes of the love of God, my wife and I have been spending time really looking at what it says, those 16 or 15 attributes of what God's love is. And if even if we have all the understanding and knowledge in the world, but we're not patient and kind and not easily provoked, and we're not puffed up, and we're not envying, and we're not behaving rudely, and not seeking our own. We think no evil. We bear all things, believe all things, hope all things, endure all things. And that was a micro. I missed a couple there. But I mean, this is what I feel the movement is happening now is that there's like this ignition happening in people who have understood the rhythms of the front of the Bible, who have learned of the Torah and realized that, Jesus really came to connect the story through faith, and we're part of those tribes and we're grafted in by faith. But now I feel like there's this stirring where we as a community have realized that it's not about exclusion, it's about occupying and going and being the light to the world. So it's a weird space, Jim. We're trying to navigate. There's only so much time, and I'm still a dad, and I'm a husband. We have another. Well, we're we're doing we're after kingdom stuff, man.
You're after kingdom stuff, and you're living in a 4,000 square foot camper, right?
Yeah, we sold.
Yeah, more like a
So one
40 square
thing,
foot.
yeah. Well, when we came back from COVID, Alexis felt like we were supposed to sell everything. Um, and so she sold my chair out from underneath me. She sold the place we were leasing, and we sold her it all, not knowing what the next step was. And then you start saying, all right, God, did we overstep because we're made in your image and your likeness? So we like to co-create. Did we add to? You said
Yeah.
ABC, we went XYZ. But 3 hours after we prayed, a family called from Texas and donated a Class A RV, and that it's been amazing. Anybody listening and watching in this, just trust God, man. Step into that uncomfortable place in the middle of your struggle, mentally, emotionally. Be vulnerable, open up. If it's financial, if it's a big life choice, like just don't be afraid of seeing how big our God is, and that He really wants to show you what it is to trust Him. I think we get to a place of where we surrender, right? But that's like you and me coming with our hands up.
Yeah.
We don't surrender on sometimes on purpose. We feel like we're cornered. The cops corner you. We put our hands up. But getting into a place where you submit, where you
Yeah.
kneel, where you bow, where you prostrate, and you begin to know that God wants to show you He's your provider and He's your Lord. And yeah,
I'm on your website here, and so maybe you can share this. Let me share this with everybody here. So, Bridge the Gap, May 19th through
yeah.
22nd. What's that all about?
So Bridge the Gap actually, from when we were just there with you guys at the 12 to 1 conference, and Tyler, that amazing young brother that's there locally with the whole group of the Ozarks, he had been reaching out, wanting to bring the tent to that area. Um, and that's honestly how the conference with you and me just kind of happened, is
Yeah.
because it just landed that way. And so we want to bring the tent to that area, but we're not even, this isn't going to be a full outreach tent. It's really a bridge the gap, the 19th to the 22nd there in Ava, at the campground. And it's really focusing on bridging the gap in our families, bridging the gap of learning how to be better at outreach, bridging the gap from the 18 inches from our head knowledge to our heart. There's going to go a call. It's 2.5 days, 3 days. We're camping. There's no fee other than you have to pay for your lodging, which there's the campgrounds there or hotels, and we have a link that takes you to all of that info. But it really is going to be 3 days where technology is diminished. We're going to encourage people not to even bring their phones into the tent. We're not going to stream live, and we're just going to be present with each other and really begin, to live life. And I think from here, because we've got a year and a half of tent meetings, I did about six. I'm of seven. I'm learning as we go. I think the Father's keeping us pliable, and what hopefully is going to come from bridging the gap is that more of the Hebraic Christian rooted, Bible believing, full Bible Hebrews, all of us people, I believe that you're going to start seeing in the fall and then going into 2023, specific cities that we're going to try to put a rallying cry out to the Hebraic community across America to say, hey, travel to this city. We're going to have prayer teams. We're going to have in evening tent meetings where it's the gospel. It's the main messages of the tent meetings are, it's a call to the covenant, coming back into all of the covenants of God. Not that they've been done away with, but understanding the front of the book, the festivals, Jesus saves. It's God. It's interesting how God's did it. So bridging the gap though is going to be 3 days of internal, just really praying, people sharing, worship, taking the stress off and really beginning to say, God, how do we be more effective? The tip of the spear is powerful, it cuts, but it's the body of the spear that kills. Um, and I think these tent meetings have slowly been growing. I think there's been a lot of people very just looking at it because are there really evangelists in the Torah movement? Are there really people that are doing big event outreach? Is this even something that we should be doing? And I think people are beginning to realize the Father's hand so in this. And I just envision we invading cities and going out and praying for people and loving on people and being the light of the world, encouraging people to come back to the tent meetings and to see God show up in a big way. So Bridge the Gap in May at Ava, the 19th to the 22nd, is like an open call to really anybody to come. It's pretty cheap. It's not going to cost you anything. And we're just going to like seek God and pray and cast vision and really just say, what happens if some of us can rally together?
Yeah.
And so it's not just me and my few couple of us, but we have a coalition of people. So
That's fantastic. One of the things that I love about you, Nathan, is that, you even challenge me. One of the attributes that you have is really letting the Father move you. And I've noticed, even from a distance, even in our friendship, that you really are intentional about going slow to go fast. And so, as I like to call it, in my former dirt bike racing world, that if you go fast, you're going to wreck, and it takes way more energy to get back up and get back in the race, and then you got to pass everybody again. So why not slow down in the turns? Go fast on the straightaways because you can see right as far as you can go. But when the turn starts to come up, really slow down and be intentional about staying in that groove and using what's pressing up against you, which is that berm, right? That dirt is pressing up against you. It's telling you can't go in this direction anymore. And I think one of the things that religious people are terrible at is using the restrictions of life, using the berms of life, the curves of life when it throws you a curveball. We don't know how to use that to gain traction, right? And because in the dirt bike world, when you get about halfway into that berm, it's full on gas. Like it's then you can go as fast as you want, and you use the resistance to your advantage. And but you have to slow down to get to that place. And I know that the Father's really given you a heart for prayer. And before we kind of close out, can you take the last couple of minutes here Before we bring on Chris Frankie from Lion Lamb Ministries, can you talk about how prayer has radically revolutionized your life? Because I know it has mine. What say you?
Yeah, I would say I, I I say it every time, but I mean it. I want my son Ashton and my wife and my daughter, and my wife actually is really joining in with me. We just want our kids to know whenever we take our last breath that we spent hours with God and minutes with men. And what that means is, whatever we give our time to, will we give more of that same time to the Lord? And prayer to me, you know, it's everything. And that's not a cliche where I say I want to spend hours with God and minutes with men. I mean it. Like I'm really trying to make God the most frequented thing that I do with my day. If it's praying while I'm walking, and I know we can have this living prayer life, but I'm even talking like, waking up and sacrifice costing things. I mean, you and me, Jim, we text each other a lot in the mornings and trying to hold each other really accountable to this place of, you know, our prayer life really is the most important thing as a believer we can do. Jesus, Yeshua, the thing that was paramount that he changed the disciples' paradigm was they said, teach us to pray. They realized, like they watched this servant, this teacher, this Messiah press in and pray. And and when the verses in Corinthians, when it says eye hasn't seen or ear hasn't heard, that's entered into the heart of man, the thing that's God prepared for those that love him. And it goes on and it starts talking about, who can have the mind of a man but a man, and you can't know the mind of another. But it says that you and I have the mind of Messiah. So that means the eyes that haven't seen and the ears that haven't heard, that's entered into the heart, we have access to that if we're willing. And I love what your son-in-law and your daughter had shared about courtship as I was listening about. We have special moments that are ours, and we appreciate them because it really cost us something. Um, man, prayer is just, I don't care, Jim, if I never preached another sermon in my life, if I never stood on another platform with a microphone, if I could just text my friends, if I could just be a voice in people's ears and saying like, die to your flesh more, keep praying, fast more, like press in, press in. Like I just want to be a person that if you're around me, you're like, man, I want to press into God more. I don't care if I'm able to tickle your ears with the preaching and the knowledge. I just want to carry a fire that others want that's accessible, but you
Yeah.
can't get that unless it's in prayer. And I just posted something the other day, and I mean it. You know, revival awakening is birth in secret.
Mm.
We all want to go to events. We want to go to the next
Come on.
conference. We're trying to go and catch God, and that's okay. But if you haven't created the altar, and where the embers can land, so when you
Yeah.
go to an event or if you go somewhere, you've got to have created the place that you can carry that altar back with you, and that only happens in prayer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it, man.
No, that's really good. And Nathan, thank you so much for not only joining us and taking some time out of your day. I know you're away from your family and you're in a hotel right now, and so shout out to Alexis and thank you so much for letting us borrow your husband. But at the end of the day, like the Father has really got his hand on you. It's very clear the amount of people that you're impacting, and even the kids that in the secular schools don't think that they are not being impacted in the spiritual realm, because the Father did this through his son. And I thought this was really interesting. I learned this when I was getting my master's in theology, that Yeshua didn't always just walk on the beach and go, who wants to accept me into their life? Can I see? Oh, I see that hand. I mean, like that's not always his ministry. His ministry sometimes was just lifting people up from a place of undignity to a place of dignity, just one extra place of feeling like they count, they matter, that they're valuable. You know, I feel like most people that are on depression medication struggle with anxiety. You know, it's not a coincidence that they struggle with value. They struggle with that inner being of, do people appreciate me? Am I loved? And I think that's why the simple message of Yeshua was, look, for God so loved the world. Like, that's just where we're supposed to start, right? Well, Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time, for spending it with us. And ladies and gentlemen, go visit his website, nathanharmon.org. Find out what he's up to in these tent meetings that he's doing around the country.
Come to bridge the gap, man.
Come bridge the gap. I probably am going to come to Bridge the Gap May 19th through 22nd. It's a cool graphic. At the very least, I want to find out where that bridge is and take a picture there.
And Jim, man, I love you, man. I know you're going to get off here, but just, you played a huge role in my wife and I. It was 5 years ago with marriage counseling, even when you were in your higher educational learning facility, via emails. Just, you know, our friendship was birthed in a special way, and just your gift for what God's doing in your life and with everything that's happening. It's just you really have played a super big role in me and Alexis's marriage, and I tremendously honor and value and appreciate you for that, for what God's doing through you with all that you're kind of trying to navigate. So,
man, brother, I really appreciate that. You know, to Yah be all the glory. You know, what we're trying to do here in the relaunch of Passion for Truth. Matter of fact, this was supposed to be a fundraiser event. I've completely forgotten about all of that because we've had so much fun with each one of our guests. But we are trying to bring a couple of people on, staff here financially. And so Nathan, thank you so much for your kind words, and brother, have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on the other side quickly. Okay.
All right. I'll text you in the morning to pray.
All right, buddy. Thank you. If this ministry has been a blessing to you, would you consider partnering with us? A matter of fact, we've created a new campaign. Let me bring it up for you real quickly. It's real simple. You can text "Pay It Forward." Now, that's supposed to be all one word. So "Pay It Forward," all one word, no spaces, to 801-801. And would you please partner with us? Even if you can do just one monthly gift of $10 a month. If we have literally tens of thousands of people that are encouraged through this meeting, through this ministry, and but very, very few give on a monthly basis to help support us, to not only keep the lights on, but for us to grow. See, our intention here at Passion for Truth is that we want to grow our organization to where we have other pastors, other teachers, and we have enough tech people behind the scenes, graphic artists, you name it, designers, translators, especially translators. If you are an English speaker right now, and I know you are because I'm speaking English and you're listening, we need your help. Let me throw this out there. The Hispanic community is 3 times larger than our English audience. Let me say that again. It is 3 times larger than our English speaking audience, and we have almost no support for the Hispanic side. We need full-time translators. We need full-time graphic artists that are duplicating everything, and we have them waiting in the wings. That's the amazing thing. We have a translator, we have tech people, and we have a designer and graphic artists that are all Hispanic, and that are waiting for us to be able to quit their job so that they can work with us full time. And so we're looking forward to you guys partnering with us and allowing us to go to that level where we can begin to minister on a greater level. So this next guest, guess who this next guest is? This is one of my favorite people of all time, Dr. Chris Frankie. I call him that anyway, aka Mason Clover, back in the day. Worship artist, and right now he is the operations director of Lion and Lamb Ministry. So hold on, because right after him, we will go straight to, who do we got here coming up after Chris Frankie is, Kevin Jessup with the Global Return Conference, Washington, D.C. This gentleman, you're going to want to stick around to hear what he has to say. You've not heard him before, most likely, unless you've watched him on television on the largest broadcast in the history of mankind on live streaming. So check him out in about 30 minutes from now. We'll be talking to Kevin Jessup, and then Warren Marcus, the creator of Superbook, is going to be with us. And he's also a best-selling author. And in the 8 o'clock hour, we'll be talking to outfielder Chicago Cubs Rafael Ortega. And then to round out our lineup for the evening, we'll be talking to Moses Tyrone, who is a Hispanic Hebrew rap artist. He's going to tell his story and how he escaped from being sacrificed to Satan and how God has used him in his musical gift to witness the Torah and the front of the book to literally hundreds of thousands of Hispanic people around the world. And so we're going to come back with Chris Franke right after this message.